Now that both sides are surface prepped and I've decided which side my rosette is going on, what I need to do is figure out where the center line is in order to measure and mark for the rosette. If your joint has been done correctly, it can be really difficult to see, and this one is no exception. So I need to mark the center line a little bit better to lay this template over accurately and correctly. I marked my centers at the top and at the bottom, just making a light line down there. It is, all right, yeah, it is super tough to see. Lay this out on my template, and if you don't have a plexiglass template, just use your form or buy an extra plan and cut the guitar shape out. I mean, there's a number of ways you can do this. This plexi is just the easiest way for me because I have it. I'm just making a very light pencil line. I don't need to indent the fibers or make this super dark at all. Measuring on my plans, the center of the sound hole is about 149 millimeters from the top edge of the guitar. About right there. It sure looks like the middle of the sound hole that I drew. This is where the pin is going to get drilled for our rosette jig, circle cutting jig. There are a few different ways that we can cut the channel for our rosette. With most of the methods, we have to first drill a hole right in the middle of the sound hole in order to orbit around that and lay out our purfling. There are some jigs and tools that will use a knife to go around and cut those, and then you just manually come around with a chisel. The method that I use is a circle cutting template, and that is very similar, but it uses a Dremel tool to mill out the channel so that I don't have to come in and actually chisel things out. All the waste is going to be taken out with that Dremel. So I'm going to drill the pilot hole for the center pin. I use a brad point bit so that it does not skate around on me. I'm going to put a scrap piece of wood underneath. I'm not really concerned about this MDF getting dinged up, but it is what I use to plane and surface my tops on, so I'd rather keep it intact. I'm going to put that backer board behind it. And I see the other wood coming through, and it is done. Brush off the surface anytime you pick that top up. I have my hole here. Put the center pin through. And that hole's in the MDF as well. Now we are set to start laying out the rosette. Now that that pin is in, I can just do a double check on the circle template, make sure that my equipment is working correctly, and that looks good. There are a number of circle templates like this that you can get. There are some that are incredibly fancy and have a lot of different adjustments, fine-tuned adjustments. This one, although it isn't cheap, is one of the less expensive ones, and it's not super elaborate, but it does the job well. I'm really happy with this one, and I like that I don't have to manually chisel out the rosette. For the purposes of this instructional video, I am just going to do a standard herringbone rosette. There are a few different ones that you can get that are a similar size, but for now, this one is going to do just fine. The general layout is that we are going to have this herringbone and then purfling on the inside and outside. Let's take a look at this rosette. This is a typical rosette that comes in the LMI kits. It's one of your basic choices. This is a herringbone. You can see the herringbone pattern in there. This right here does not mean it's broken. That is just in there to accommodate for any changes, any oddities. If we need to massage the size a little bit, it just gives us a little flexibility so we don't have to be so perfect. And this is going to be on top. Anything that we're doing on the rosette, we want to start and stop up here because this is going to be under the fretboard. So if any mistakes happen, any funky cuts when we're plunging that circle cutter in, that is going to get covered up by the fretboard. So this gap can open, close, it can do whatever we need it to get the correct size. Because, believe it or not, these aren't perfectly round all the time. These are made up of a lot of individual parts, and when they make these, they do actually an amazing job of keeping them as round as they are for all the things that go into making these little rosettes. The way I want to start measuring for this is to lay it down and take our ruler to it, and we're going to need to do a little bit of geometry. So you rest your ruler on one side, on the inside, and then swing your ruler around, and the widest point that you're going to see is going to be the center of that line. And I am getting about 112. I'm actually going to go, I'm going to let that spread out just a little bit. I'm okay doing that. We need to be sure to allow enough room on the inside of this, between this and the sound hole, to get a purfling strip. And I want to do that on the inside and the outside, about 2 to 3 millimeters away from this is where I want that purfling line to go. And if this is too narrow, and I go 2 or 3 millimeters out for the purfling and another 2-3 millimeters out, well, not 2, I want to keep that about 3, to the sound hole, we're going to run out of room, or I'm going to have to make my sound hole smaller. And I don't really want to do that. I don't want to compromise the sound hole if I don't have to, although 99 millimeters versus 100 millimeters for the sound hole is fine. But like we were talking about before, with this gap, we've got a little bit of room, although if we go too extreme, then it starts to be a little eccentric, and it won't match up to our circle anyway. And that's probably a little bit too much information, a little bit of a tangent, I apologize, but these are the things that I think of when I am trying to troubleshoot ahead of time and keep myself out of trouble. 113 for the inside of my rosette. Half of that, 56 and a half. Getting awfully precise, aren't we? All right, 56 and a half. There is one line. Now I'm going to go the other way down here to 113 and mark that. Now let's see where we end up. Yeah. So that looks about right. Now those match up to my marks pretty well. That's going to leave me enough room on the inside to get a purfling strip in there between that and the sound hole. I'm going to give myself a mark here. So I have a little bit of an idea of where I'm starting and stopping for the width. Although when I start cutting these, I'm going to take this inside measurement, that 56.5 millimeters, and I'm going to start there. I'm going to work my way around, and then I'm going to creep my way up to this outside mark, always using this as a reference. Does this fit? Does it not fit? Work my way up to it until it works. I'm just doing some checking to see how consistent the width is. 0.24, 0.24, 0.24, 0.24 all the way around. Good. So it doesn't look like there's any obvious spots that are going to be too wide. Now to set up the circle cutting jig for our height of a cut. I am going to use this Rosette to determine my height. And I'm going to take this base and set it right down on top of it. And I am going to adjust that until it just touches the top of the soundboard. So I make an adjustment, and I give it a little back and forth to see if it's scraping, and it's just contacting that surface. So I like where that is. I'm going to tighten this up and then make a couple of test cuts. I've just got a scrap piece of wood here. I'm going to make my test cut out on the corner. And that's actually a little too deep. What I'm looking for is for the rosette to be even with the surrounding piece or slightly proud, like by maybe 0.1 millimeters, if that, but just, just so we can kind of perceive a ridge on it. If we get it too low, if the rosette is too low in the soundboard, we're going to end up digging a hole in it to try and get the whole soundboard down to the rosette level. We don't want to do that. If we cut our channel and for some reason we do get it too low, there are ways to fix that. But if we don't have to, let's not even go there. So I need to actually raise my bit up a little so I don't get quite as deep of a cut. With this particular jig, every adjustment I make, there are 4 different screws to mess with, or knobs. So it's not an immediate adjustment, but it is fairly exact when they get all tightened down. Okay, let's see how that test cut is. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Just a little bit proud of that cut. That is exactly what I want. Cool. You should start and end your cuts up here on the top because this is going to get covered up by the fretboard, and that's where we want to start. So if anything happens, again, we can, it's going to get covered up. So it's not a huge deal. Now, I like to start my cuts at the inside mark, at this inside mark closest to the sound hole. So I'll plunge here, I'll cut all the way around, and then I'll creep my way out and out and out. Now the bit I'm using is a 3/32 down cut spiral bit. As you may have seen in the sound port video, that down cut bit is going to force those fibers down, and they are not going to shoot a lot of fibers up that we have to kind of brush off at the top or risk tear out at the very top, where we want as crisp a line as we can get. So I'm going to start up my Dremel. I'm going to get it up to speed, and then I'm going to plunge it down into it. Let's see how we turned out. All right. That's good. It looks like my circle met up exactly where I started, which is exactly what I want. I am happy with the way that looks. Now what I want to do is creep my bit out about half the width of the blade. And that's about as much of a cut as I want to do. It's going to be less stress on the blade, and all the waste will have a chance to empty itself out into this channel. Give myself a few turns on the adjuster, and I'm ready to take this next pass. Now that pass went much faster. There's just so much less stress on the blade, on the bit, because we're taking so much of a smaller cut. A nice brush is a good thing to have to keep things clean. Make sure nothing gets down underneath your soundboard. And we are ready to make another adjustment out. As you get closer to this outside mark, it's okay to put this rosette up to your channel and see how close you're getting. Not very, well, closer than we were before, but I've got another quarter of a pass, half a pass yet. Still creeping up to the edge of that outer edge mark. Do a little test width there and see, is that going to fit down in there? It is, and it's actually too wide. So I need to narrow up my cut. Do not want that sloppiness in there. All right, bring my cut back. All right, now it is almost wide enough. I mean, it is so close. So I'm going to clean up the bottom of this channel first, and then I'm going to creep up to the inner edge and take just a kind of a skim pass on it. Now I've got one part that does not want to go in. Everything else can be pressed into the channel. But right here, I am going to need to scrape that just a little bit wider. And if you need to pull the rosette out, just use a little, something like a ruler to give you a little leverage to slide that out. We don't want to yank it out by the end and snap it. All right, so I was right in here that I've got to make that correction. I'm just going to press the side of that just a little bit. I'm not doing much more than compressing the channel, the side of the channel. Don't really want to do any cutting here if I don't have to, because it's such a fine line between fitting and not fitting that it could be just a little fuzzy kind of hanging it up. Yep. All right. That's all it took. Okay. So now I'm going to pull this back out. And you do want a very tight fit in this channel if you can. We don't want big gaps that we're going to have to fill with glue, because those things are going to be seen really easily through the finish. But we also don't want it so tight that we are compressing and collapsing the nice corner that we've made for ourselves here, this little edge. We don't want that to fold that in because we're pressing down on that rosette so hard. There is a middle ground. Hopefully you can find that, and you can creep up to these edges slow enough to allow you to do that. I'm just going to clean up the bottom of the channel by dragging this chisel along there. Make sure there's nothing hanging on, that I've got all my little fuzzy bits taken off. At this point, you can glue the rosette in and then come back later and do the purfling strips. I prefer to get them all done at once. So I'm going to leave this out, and I am going to set up for my purfling. The bit I used for this main rosette channel was about a 30 seconds, I think. You can use an 1/8, you can use a 1/16. Really, I mean, you can use whatever you like on it. I wanted to use at least the 30 seconds because it had a little more meat to it. It's a little wider, takes a little less work, a couple fewer passes to get done what I needed to do. And it's just less work on all the tools if you can use a slightly bigger bit. And it's a little stiffer, so it doesn't get kicked around by smashing through the grain lines. But we are going to have to do that with this purfling strip. Now this bit I'm using for the purfling, I believe is a 1/16 bit. I am just going to use the existing rosette channel to reset my depth after I put the new bit in. Don't use the purfling for your depth, because the purfling itself is much deeper than the rosette. And when I say much, I mean about 25% deeper. Okay, that is set up. Now I need to measure the distance that I'm going to put the purfling strip. Looking at the sound hole. Sound hole is about 100 millimeters. So if we go 50, that puts us our sound hole about right there, which gives us 6.5 millimeters from the edge of the rosette to the sound hole. That's great, because I want 2.5 to 3 millimeters in between the rosette and this purfling strip. I've got a test block Okay, good there. I need to duplicate this space over here. And that is 3 millimeters on the nose. That is pretty much 3 millimeters on the money. Now, you may be tempted to go back through and do another pass with this same bit to clean this up. I would highly recommend against that because the tolerances are already, they're a little loose with this purfling. And I would not want to take another pass and risk opening that hole up even more. It's just not necessary. So I'm going to clean this up and then install the rosette, purfling strips, and glue it up. If you do get little bits hanging off the top, it's all right to go in there and pull those off with a little sandpaper. Because if you do get one of those down into there when you're trying to glue up, it could mess it up a little bit and cause it to sit in there funny, stand proud. Just not what we want. So get that nice and cleaned up before we go for this glue up. I am laying this in there. Oh, trying to jump out at me. So I can cut it. Looks like they're fitting in there just fine. Now I'll pull those out. We will get glue into these channels and glue it up on the go bar deck. We are back at the go bar deck. There are a number of glues you can use. You can use super glue. I've used it before, but you have to be careful if you're going to use super glue in this channel. Well, and it's a slightly different process. What you would want to do is press everything into place, get it in there, and then just flood it with your super glue. I don't want to do that on this one. This is going to work just fine. But if you did use CA, cyanoacrylate super glue, you'd want to shellac all of these first so that the super glue didn't wick itself straight up through these grains and discolor the wood. It's gonna turn it yellow underneath the finish, and it's gonna be really uneven, and you will most likely be very unhappy with it. Yellow glue. That's all we need to use. And we don't need to necessarily flood it. We don't need to use a ton. But you do want all three sides of these channels to have a glue contact with the rosette or the purfling strip. And if you put too much in, it'll also try to kick it out. So it'll raise it right back up. We don't need our purfling being evicted from its channel. On the rosette channel, I just do a decent layer in the bottom and then come back through, get my finger in there, take out the excess, and spread it along the walls of the channel at the same time. Not too much glue, not too little glue. We want medium. When in doubt, go medium. Now, if you are going to do something I use a block of wood here to press the rosette into place and to squeeze the excess glue out of the channel. Go ahead and make a couple of passes around it just to make sure there isn't excess glue behind the rosette that will cause it to unnecessarily heave. Okay, that is in there. The rosette itself is flush. Purflings are gonna stick up just a little bit just because they're taller. I didn't want to route those all the way in because then they'd start sticking through when I thickness the top. I'm going to put plastic over this. And usually the plastic bag that the rosette came in will work just fine for that. Here we just need something firm to use as a clamping caul over the plastic to keep pressure on the rosette and the purfling. Then we can start on the go bars to clamp it in place. We will leave it in the go bar deck for about 30-40 minutes. Then we can pull that off, start cleaning it up. This has been clamped up about 45 minutes. It is ready to be scraped. I'm trying not to bend my thumbs into it and really get aggressive. Trying to just find the hook on the card scraper, because I still want to keep this flat and avoid digging myself a hole. Go back over the top with it with a 180. All right, that rosette is done.